Welcome to Disruptive Successor, a show for next generation leaders in family businesses and entrepreneurs who want to disrupt the status quo and take their existing business to a whole new level. We all know that what got us here isn't going to get us there. This show will provide inspiration, advice, and resources to help you create massive impact. This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session. Hi, it's Jonathan Goldhill, and welcome back to another episode of the Disruptive Successor Show. Today's guest is an entrepreneur in his own right who is in a family business, but has taken a new twist or turn along the way. He's Nick Gray, founder, investor, entrepreneur, and best-selling author who wrote a book about building big relationships by hosting small gatherings. He started and sold two multi-million-dollar companies, Museum Hack and Flight Display Systems, the latter, which was a family business that he was the next generation leader of. Now he has a very unique and strange and non-traditional book that just launched on Amazon and is called The 2-Hour Cocktail Party, and I believe is a best-selling book. Nick believes that there is a bit of loneliness, an epidemic happening, and nobody teaches adults how to make new friends. He thinks he's figured out that formula with his new book and how it's helping people build big relationships, whether it's for business or personal purposes. Nick, welcome to the show today.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. Happy to talk about family business.
All right. So that's where you got your roots. Tell us how it all began. Tell us a little about your family. What was your first understanding of entrepreneurial business and family business? Was it in a family business? What was that?
You know what? I grew up in a very entrepreneurial household. My father was like a mad scientist. He was a salesman who thought he was an engineer, maybe the worst type, right? Mm-hmm. And I grew up, and you know what? I had a lot of hustles when I was growing up. I had the lawn care business like anybody did. I remember doing weekends with my father, and our weekend father-son bonding was we had a blue blocker sales distributorship where we would show up at these county fairs, very low budget things, and sell these sunglasses to people, cash business. I was probably in 5th grade or 6th grade. And that was like family bonding with me and my dad, trying to scrap it together with a good little hustle.
All right. What part of the country was that, by the way, Nick? Where were you?
I was in Dallas, Texas, suburbs of Dallas, Texas, up in a city called Plano.
Okay. Know it well.
Yeah. Later on, I started a web hosting company as I got older and was making web pages. So I made a web hosting company that helped people put their websites on the internet. That helped me get a nice scholarship to school. And then when I was in college, my dad was starting a business out of the basement of our house. And that turned into a company called Flight Display Systems that I joined after college thinking I'd help him and my mom out. And then it grew into a much larger business.
And so what was Flight Display Systems?
Flight Display Systems was an aircraft electronics company where they would make flat screen monitors and moving map computers. You know that map that shows you the plane that's flying across the country?
Yep.
We made that for small jets. So Learjet, Citation Jet, King Airs, Pilatus PC-12s. We made the moving map and the screens and the DVD players for those small jets.
Interesting. And how old were you when you started working in that business?
I made the first website for him before I went to college. I think I was maybe even in high school. I made that in 1999. So I was probably 17, 18. And I remember I have a photo of myself one time during, I think I was a break in college, and I'm out at a trade show with him exhibiting, just me and my dad. Yeah, but I started that. And then probably 22, when I graduated college, I tried to start a software company over in India. And that was like a failure. And I came home with my tail between my legs, trying to figure out what's next. And I thought I'd help my dad out for a couple of weeks. That turned to a couple months and a couple of years. I helped him hire his first employees, and we grew it to about 75 people.
And this was still all, at what point did you move out of the basement?
Moved out of the basement very shortly after I got back. But I remember when I remember I'd come home for summers from college as they're growing it in the basement. And they took over my quote playroom where we had a pool table or like air hockey, and all that was being used for shipping and receiving. So they had set up things to start to kind of package up for the products and these electronics packed all over my playroom. I was so mad as like a college sophomore. What happened to my playroom? I was mad.
And so tell us about the relationship between your father and you in this business. How did he see you? How did you see him in the business?
That's a good question. I am so happy that I got to work with my parents in a family business. I'll be honest, when I went to college, I wasn't super close with my parents. I had my business dealings and, I was a lousy teenager, so I'm sure I wasn't very smart. But working together brought us so much closer, and it's something that I wouldn't change for the world, how close we got. We definitely had a lot of conflict, and we would have disputes, which I could talk about, which were awkward for the other employees. But I brought a lot of new ideas and kind of a tech savviness to the business. I'll give you one example. He was making all of these manuals, like these installation manuals, and he's making them by hand in Word. And I set up some like Word templates from very basic stuff that to me felt very basic. And when I did them, it saved my parents dozens of hours of time. And it was just a simple thing that I did. But you would think that I was Jesus walking on water for them. It was incredible. And I felt like a champion. It felt so good to help my parents out and to really give back for all that they'd given me.
That's great. Did you guys ever have job titles, any of you?
We did have job titles as the business started to get older and bigger. And with more employees, those job titles were helpful. So yes, but in the early days, I don't think we used job titles.
So, but in the later days, I'm interested in the relationship between you and your dad. Was like,
oh yeah,
did you see him as president and CEO? Did he?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
So we all had our own little fiefdoms within the business, and so my dad was really in charge of just the whole idea of running the business. Everything was all his idea. The products, the market, especially the new products, that was his whole world. And so he was definitely like the president and the CEO. My fiefdom was I led a lot of our recruiting, so a lot of our hiring. I led all of our marketing, and marketing extended to our print manuals for the products, the specification sheets, our magazine ads, our website, all the boxes, everything visual that was involved in the business. And then my mother was really the CFO of sorts. So she, all the money side of it, she was in charge of that. So those were our little fiefdoms, and we stayed and we played in our own sandboxes mostly.
Okay. And I assume you can talk about it. When the business was sold, I mean, did you have any ownership or equity in the business, or was it mom and dad's? How did that work?
So I was fighting hard to have a big stake in the business and being involved from the early days. My father had maintained, to his credit, he had maintained 100% of the entire business since starting it. And of course, there were people along the way who wanted to invest, or employees who wanted stakes and equity. And really, to his credit, he maintained all through the sale until the day of the sale, a 100% stake ownership in the entire business. And I'm thankful for that. And I'm proud of him for doing that, because I know it's not always like that for many family businesses. But in the end, I think that really served our family the best.
Okay, good. So, well, I assume you made a nice living from it. They paid you a fair wage, or was it, did you have to fight to get a fair wage because you're a family and you just should pitch in?
It's so funny, I think that as a family business and being close to my family, I didn't really fight too hard for my salary. I lived well below my means. I was single. I still am single. I don't have kids. I don't have a lot of expenses. And it'd be interesting to talk to my parents' perspective to see about them. Certainly when I was fighting for a piece or a stake of the equity, that was a different situation. But I didn't think too much short term as far as I want this salary. I knew that I was really building something for the family and for the good of the family. And so it's just a completely different type of sentiment versus if I was working for a big company, every single penny or dollar of salary I'd be fighting for. But I think it served me better in the long run to not really think about that.
So when the business was sold, did you go into the next venture shortly thereafter? Were there other things in between?
So I could talk about that. I think it was always my dad's dream to give me the business and for me to run the business and it to be handed down. And the way that he ran the business and the way that the business was set up, frankly, being in North Georgia, being in an industry that I wasn't extremely passionate about, it just wasn't something that I really wanted. I wasn't begging to be lined up for that business and that part of the country. And so ultimately, about a year before the business sold, I had kind of left and started my new company. And after I left the business, and then my parents got an unsolicited offer to sell it, they never thought that they would sell it. But because I had left and they got this sweet offer, it kind of just made sense for them to sell at that time.
And did your business require much capital to get started? Did they help you with that, or did you just bootstrap it on your own? Tell us a little bit.
They certainly emotionally helped me with it. I didn't need a lot of capital to get started. My next business was really weird. And I worked on it on nights and weekends. I was basically a museum tour guide, a renegade museum tour guide. I didn't work for the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. I started these very weird museum tours. It was a company called Museum Hack. And I saved up a lot of money so that I could do my hustle, my business on nights and weekends. And then when I was ready to leave the company, I had saved up a little bit. But again, I had very low living expenses. My business didn't require startup capital.
And was it literally taking tours of museums in New York, or where was this? Where were the tours?
Yes. It was literally doing tours at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. Wow. I started this company because I think museums are boring. I don't like them. They're sleepy, these tours. And I started to lead non-traditional museum tours. What that means is I didn't work for the museum. I've never taken an art history class. My tours were basically 10 cool things I found and 3 things I want to steal from the museum. And, it was just a fun hobby that I was doing for friends. Never thought it'd be a business. I did it on the side, right? Because I work in the family business. And then I started doing these tours for fun to meet people. Mm-hmm. And then it really snowballed. It became really popular. It got written about by this really famous blog who said it was the best thing to do in New York City. Wow. Literally overnight, 1,300 people emailed me wanting to join a tour. Celebrities started to come on my tours. And so then, eventually I turned it into a business.
And you weren't in North Georgia or Dallas or Austin at that time. You were in New York, weren't you?
Yes. I was living in New York City. I lived in New York for 13 years. I love New York.
Yeah. Great city. Greatest city in the world.
It's great.
I say that because I'm from New York. And that's what they say. So tell us about that business. It scaled and you sold that one as well, huh?
Yes, that was a very weird business. It's not a business that scales well, but we did. We grew to about 50 employees. We were at 5 different major metropolitan cities: New York, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Washington, D.C. And then I ended up selling it in 2019 in a seller finance transaction to my then marketing director and CEO of the business, who similarly sort of came to me with an offer that I couldn't refuse to buy the business from me.
Wow. Are you still getting paid out from that venture?
I have one last payment that'll close in the next probably month or two.
Amazing.
But they've just done really well with it by focusing on team building. And so the team building experiences, using the museum tours for that, and then going into whole new sectors. They've done incredible.
So they've expanded beyond what you had built, I take it.
Big time, big time. They have taken the business to new places that I never could have.
Amazing. Did you have any idea that the CEO, marketing director had that vision, that kind of passion to take it to the next level?
I think they were definitely riser. I don't know the word, but they were like rising stars, shining stars, people that were motivated, who could see they were running the business for me, and they could see kind of how the numbers were working out and the benefits to have a sense of ownership. And they also were smarter than me. And so to their full credit, they did a great job with it.
Well, you hired them. I'm taking it that you know a thing or two about recruiting.
I got lucky.
Okay. So interesting. So then that leads you to your next venture. Is that right?
Yes.
Where you are today?
Yeah.
I mean, this is all like, well, let's just pause for a moment and say, okay, that was pre-COVID.
Right.
Then you went through COVID. I'm not saying you had it. Maybe you did. Maybe we all did. But what was, so you sold it and then you went into basically COVID period where, isolation, loneliness, resignation was a theme that was running rampant, I think, in not only the United States, but anywhere, in any of the industrialized nations where people were being forced to stay home or stay in or, stay alone. Is that what led you to your next business venture?
Sort of. My new project, I mentioned this, is this book. It's called The 2-Hour Cocktail Party. I'm trying to convince people to host parties because it is lonely, especially as a business owner, especially running a family business. It can be lonely. And I've been working on this for years. I've been doing this for 5 years, hosting these parties, training people how to host a party, because it's not as easy as you think to host a party. To do it well requires some counterintuitive thinking, which I could speak about. But I just want to say a few last things about the family business. Can
please.
I share a few more things before we talk about that?
Absolutely.
One, we really struggled in our family business to hire a COO or a CEO who cared about the business as much as the family members do. Is that a thread or a theme that you've seen from a lot of people?
I think that's a thread, and a theme. And I can't say that I've heard it a lot, but I know it to be true. Myself, I came from a family business and I wasn't in it per se. My grandfather and his brothers built it, and there were many family members. And I don't think they ever thought about bringing in an outside executive to run the company. That was the fabric of the business. The fabric of the business was family members made up the business. I remember asking my mother, I was like, so which all family members worked in the business? And she said, what do you mean which ones worked in the business? She says, let's talk about the ones that didn't work in the business, because everyone worked in the business. It was like, so there was a commitment level, and there is a commitment level when there's family members involved. When you bring a hired gun in, I think it's really helpful when the business is large enough so that they can make decisions that are strategic and they can execute on things, and they don't get caught up in the politics of, well, that's an uncle or that's a cousin or this is, but, and you can't do this or you can't do that, or they get the privilege of this or they get the privilege of that. So it's challenging. And I think when a business is at a certain scale, it works successfully, but it has to get to that scale. And most of them, these are 8-figure and larger businesses. So,
yes, I think that's a good point, that it needs to be at that larger scale. You need that level of outside sort of professionalism. But I know as we were growing, it was really something that my father and that we struggled with, because people want to make you think as a family business owner, I don't know, maybe it was just us, that, no, we're a bunch of rednecks who don't know how to do it. And then we'd hire these real fancy, expensive people. And we'd just say, these people are idiots. Like, that's a terrible way to do the business. They would have all these ideas that didn't work at all, that were just not smart. And it took a lot of mistakes for us to realize that the things that my parents had figured out and that we figured out were really smart and really a good way of doing things. And for a long time, we thought that the opposite, oh, we're just idiots. There must be people way smarter than us. And I'm sure that there were folks that were way smarter, but the average consultant wouldn't worth their weight in dust.
That's an interesting phrase. Not their weight in dust, huh? So,
and then something else that I remember was I'm sure there's all these little stories like this, but my parents would have such an attention to detail to the care of the physical warehouse or the property, whether it involved the landscaping outside the building or just kind of like picking up garbage as they'd see it around the office on a tour. And I'm sure you hear these hokey stories where you do a tour with a job candidate and you kind of place a piece of garbage and see if they reach down to grab it as you're doing the tour.
Exactly.
That type of stuff is real stuff that my dad would do to see people's attention to detail, because they were and we were obsessed with everything. So that was kind of interesting. Have you seen similar stuff?
Oh, I think so. And I love that, do they walk over the piece of paper? Do they pick it up? A lot of people would just probably take the lead from the CEO who's walking around. And if they didn't see the CEO pick it up, then they probably wouldn't pick it up.
Yeah.
But no, I think there's a lot of truth to what you're saying. And, I think of, I know some people that are living in houses, some that are owned by a homeowner that had a lot of care for that house, others that look at it as just an investment property that they're just trying to get a return on. And the emotional the emotional attachment to a house from a prior owner will usually mean that it's a really cared for property versus the investment property. And that's kind of, I liken that to the family owned business versus the hired gun who comes in. But again, a hired gun who comes in is coming in at maybe $200,000 plus salary, plus some ownership, some stock, and this is a larger company. They usually have a pretty vested interest in seeing that it'll succeed, but maybe they won't give up their weekends like the family would. So,
right. Cause that was our life, and it was all encompassing and it was all consuming. And there was I remember a fun Sunday for me would be to, wake up early and go to Waffle House, go to church, and then go to the office because nobody's at the office, and I could play my music as loud as I want and get a start on the week ahead. But yes, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and that's not most employees' idea of fun, is to go to the office on the weekend and work when no one else is there.
Yeah,
so,
it's true. I thought about another experience that was real helpful for me in starting the business. We had a cranky old sales director who was, he served in the Vietnam War. He was real old school. And my dad had me report to him for a while, and he could give me feedback and direction in a way that my father probably couldn't, just because of our close relationship. And that was so helpful to me. And I learned so much from this guy about sales and working with customers and things like that. It was really great. So I'm thankful for that experience.
Fantastic. So, so let's get back now to the non-traditional book that you wrote.
Yes.
I keep thinking that this is an antidote to people sitting around in their houses watching TV, because
it is.
The COVID they were shut-ins and they were told to be a shut-in. So
what's up with you guys? Do you guys host at all? Do you host? Have you gotten people together for a birthday party or anything recently?
My life changed radically about a year ago. I met someone on an online dating app. We got together a few times, and our fourth date, we were going to go up to an Airbnb in Santa Barbara, which was an hour and a half north of where we were. We couldn't find anything. It was Memorial Day weekend. So she said, well, how about we go to Mexico? And I said, Mexico? It's like COVID. I mean, no one's traveling. And so this was 2021. And she said, why not? I mean, and I thought, okay, yeah, why not? Let's let the games begin. She had been traveling quite a bit. She was a very social person. We went to Mexico, had an amazing time, then came back and said, let's go up to San Francisco and Carmel. And we went there, and then weeks later, we were coming back to New York, and we were hosting a big wedding party at her house where I am right now in Southampton, New York. And there was 100 plus 120 people. And then we were off to Europe, and we were traveling and staying in people's houses and hotels and going to museums and, walking the streets. And Paris at this point where we were was in full bloom. People were out at the bars. I mean, I was just staggered and like looking at people and just like, oh my God, look at how many people are just hanging out at the bars, sitting around, smoke. Don't they know about COVID? Smoking, right. And, I never looked back at that point. I was just like, you know what? My COVID is over. I subsequently I got it once, maybe twice. It was just like a cold for me, but, I've been traveling a lot. I've been on airplanes more than I've been on airplanes in many years, and been to Europe again twice now, and been to Mexico twice, and been back and forth to New York and California multiple times. So and we're hosting parties for sure.
That's great. And you guys, I think you're in the top 1 or 2% of people that are hosts, that are gatherers. And I wrote this book, it's called The 2-Hour Cocktail Party, so that others could learn from people like you and people like me. I've hosted hundreds of parties, and I've learned, and I've written down all my lessons. But here's the idea. Here's what I want to challenge you to, if you two would be open to it. I think you can get a ton of benefits by hosting a cocktail party that has some constraints and some rules. What do I mean by that? I mean, everybody has name tags, for one. 2, it's only 2 hours long. 3, it's held on a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday night. And 4, you're going to do rounds of icebreakers with people just to mix up the conversational groups. And so I wrote this book, and I've trained and helped hundreds of people now host their first cocktail party. Because I think that when you own a family business, when you're in a family business, if you're a business owner, it can be really lonely.
Yes.
I remember with Museum Hack, my last company, I hired all these really cool tour guides, people that were actors, educators, stand-up comedians. And somebody said, Nick, one day your tour guides, they're so cool. They're going to host a party. They're all going to host a party, and they're not going to invite you. And I was like, wow. And they said, that's because you're the boss. They don't want to hang out with their boss. And I remember that did happen, and it can be lonely. And when you host a party like this, it could be a great way to network and bring other business owners together. So that's what my book is about. I'm on a mission to get 500 people to read and host a party for their friends, neighbors, and colleagues. And it can really be a powerful tool as you're running your business to use hosting these parties for recruiting, for socializing, for making new friends, all these things. I probably don't have to tell you the value and the benefits you can get from having a real powerful network.
Yeah. Well, I think that we used to have a saying that the revenue is in the relationships. And so business is a contact sport. You got to get out and get face to face, belly to belly. I seem to have managed to build a nice business, mostly being on Zoom, but I like to get up close and personal like I do on my podcast with people and find out really what's going on. So I think it's a really interesting concept, and I like the challenge. What I really like also is that you've set a goal. Maybe it's not, we call it a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal. Maybe 500 is not that much of a BHAG. Maybe it's a 1 year, highly achievable goal for you. I do remember that we organized what I think we call them. They were like parties. I'm going back to the early 1980s when people were really scared about an impending potential nuclear disaster.
Okay.
And part of it was from nuclear reactor plants that we were afraid was going to explode like 3 Mile Island did. And there was an activist whose name I believe was Helen Caldicott, who talked about it being 2 minutes or 4 minutes or 10 minutes before midnight. Like you needed to, like, that was what her book was called. And so we hosted an event, town halls that happened in churches and in chambers and in meeting halls across the country. I think there was, Newsweek reported 2,400, I think, total meetings that happened in the week following the release of a movie. It was called The Day Before, and or maybe it was called The Day After. I can't remember. Well, our nonprofit organization was called The Day After Project, and our goal,
The Day After, yes,
was to organize town halls where people would talk about this potential impact of a nuclear, disaster, and how it would be. We had a whole series of questions. How it would be a life-changing event. So there was rules, if you will. There was a format. There was sort of a time frame, and there was some media attention in the New York Times and Newsweek that was following us. And so I get it. I mean, I think it was for us that was a really powerful endeavor. I was in my early 20s and organizing this nonprofit organization. I think it's great what you're doing, Nick. I like it. I think I love having a big, hairy, audacious goal, or maybe for you, it's a 1 year, maybe it's a 3 year, highly achievable goal. And,
yes.
And I think, is there a business model behind this? Do you hope just to sell books? What's your aspiration from it from a business standpoint?
Well, I think that I'm so similar to my last company, which was Museum Hack, and everybody, you should make a business. Oh, I didn't want to make a business. I focused on creating the best product and the best museum tours, and then a business came out of it.
Right.
Similar to this, same thing with this. I want to work with 500 people. That is for me my big, hairy, audacious goal, because it's crazy. It's very hard to get people to change their life to host a party, and each one I'm counting. It's hard. Every single one I celebrate, literally. And after I do 500, I'll see if there's pain points, if there's massive value I can create and add. But I'm lucky that in selling those 2 businesses, I've also made some good stock investments. Oh, and we were going to talk about, I run a small family office now to manage my investments. And so in doing that, I'm lucky to not have to work again, or need to, at least until I have kids or I get some expensive hobbies like watches or golf. I don't have to, I keep my low living expenses. For now, this is a passion project, but I'm spending so much time on it. I'm laser focused. I just like to talk to people about hosting parties and making friends. Nobody teaches adults how to make friends. It's crazy.
I think it's great. And what really comes through, Nick, is your passion, your excitement, your enthusiasm. And that's infectious, contagious is the sort of maybe the negative way of putting it, but that's really infectious. If you can excite other people, then, that's what leadership is all about. If you can create followership, then you're a leader.
Yes.
And if you've got passion and if people see like, wow, this guy is doing this just for like, there's a goodness out of this. I think that's a great and noble endeavor that you're taking on.
Thanks for saying that. Thanks. I appreciate it. I talked to this guy, by the way, who lives in the suburbs of Dallas, and his partner passed away a year ago around COVID. And he said he's been struggling with grief, and he read my book, and he's been looking for a solution to get his friends and neighbors to gather again. And he just hosted his party last week, and he sent me the pictures of him getting together with people. Those stories like that, yeah, they're nice. They're nice. They make me happy.
Well, that's awesome. And I'll try and connect you to someone who's put an appointment on my calendar for this week. They're a church initiative organization out of the Southeast United States that is developed, as best I can tell from their website, they've developed an online curriculum of courses, maybe video courses, dealing with grief, dealing with divorce. I'm sure they deal with addiction. And I could see nothing better than a 2-hour, maybe they get rid of the cocktail party, but call it a 2-hour party or something like that.
Yes. Yeah. A 2-hour seltzer party.
Yeah. There you go.
That's good.
Fabulous. Hey, Nick. So it was great. So people can pick up a copy of your book, The 2-Hour Cocktail Party, on Amazon. And if people would like to get a hold of you, how would you like them to do that?
Oh, you got to check out my book. It's called The 2-Hour Cocktail Party. It's also available on audiobook now. It just came out wherever you buy your audiobooks. And if you go to my website, nickgraynews.com, then you can subscribe to my friend's newsletter where I send out interesting business articles and great books, or even fantastic YouTube links that I find that are really nice and informative. So I also wrote some articles that I'm going to share for the show notes, maybe, that are like how to plan a networking event, how to host a clothing swap, really popular with women, how to do a book swap, how to host a happy hour. And the dirty little secret is I wrote a book about how to host cocktail parties, and I don't even drink alcohol myself, but we use that phrase cocktail party because it's just a social thing. So I'll include those in the show notes. And I'm on social media at Nick Gray News, NickGray News, NEWS. So
fabulous.
Say, hey, if you have a family business, love to connect.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I think the funniest part of it is that you don't even drink alcohol. That's just great. It's
funny, right?
It's so funny. Well, I've enjoyed having you on the show. And folks, if you got some value from this, please share this with others. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a 5-star review on your listening podcast app of choice. And of course, stay around for future episodes of the Disruptive Successor Show. Thanks a lot.
This podcast is sponsored by myself, Jonathan Goldhill, and my company, the Goldhill Group, where we provide coaching for growing companies. I'm Jonathan Goldhill, and my purpose is simple: to guide entrepreneurial leaders in family businesses towards more freedom and fulfillment. I want entrepreneurs to get clarity around the changes that will make them and their businesses more successful so they can experience the same freedom I've enjoyed in my life. Our proven practices challenge business owners to think differently about their business and how they're running it, and quite literally become game changers in our clients' companies. Learn more at thegoldhillgroup.com website, where you can schedule your free strategy session.
Thank you for joining us on the Disruptive Successor Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, review, and share with a friend who would benefit from the message. If you're interested in picking up a copy of my book, Disruptive Successor, go to disruptivesuccessor.com.